Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go. I spent the past couple of hours behind the wheel, making my way to the Marriott in Baltimore. My plan was to surprise my wife, who's attending a conference there, by dropping in and taking her out to dinner. But let's be real, that's wishful thinking. Over the past 3 months, I've had this nagging suspicion that my wife might be having an affair with one of her coworkers. Every time she goes on a business trip, training, or conference, it feels like she's betraying our trust. Tonight, I'm determined to confront her and put an end to this uncertainty once and for all. Julia and I have been married for 14 years. We have 2 wonderful children, Diana, who's 12, and Darren, who's 10. Right now, they're staying with my mother. Julia and I tied the knot right after high school. We've been high school sweethearts, dating for the last 2 years of school, and marriage seemed like the natural progression. Julia was always a radiant presence, with her long brown hair and slender frame, featuring strong, angular facial features. She never seemed to have an extra ounce of fat on her. Until about 3 months ago, I believed we had a rock-solid marriage. But lately, there have been little things, subtle shifts in behavior that I couldn't quite put my finger on. I've hesitated to confront her about it, fearing I'd come off as paranoid or jealous. But with today's conference nearby, I see an opportunity to unexpectedly drop in and perhaps catch her in the act. Dragging my suit bag behind me, I head to the check-in counter, steeling myself for whatever I might discover. Hello, I'm James Murphy. My wife Julia is here for the insurance conference and is staying in room 214. She mentioned I could pick up a spare key here. After a quick check on the computer, the clerk handed over the key. Could I see some identification, please? Sure thing. It's good that you're being cautious, I replied, presenting my driver's license. My nerves were on edge as I made my way to the elevator. What would I do when I confronted her? What should I say? Should I knock or just barge in? Would she have the safety latch on? Would she be alone? Would she even be in the room? Walking down the hallway, I decided to simply insert the key and try the door. I'd have to play it by ear from there. I tried to move as quietly as possible. After unlocking the door, I cautiously pushed it open, only to find Julia sitting at a desk, engrossed in paperwork. She spun around with a gasp. "James, you scared me. What are you doing here?" "Hey, honey, I had some free time and thought I'd surprise you with dinner," I explained. "Fantastic. You're staying the night, right? I could really use the company," she exclaimed, planting a kiss on my lips. Well, it seemed my grand plan to catch her in the act was a complete failure. With a smile, she headed off to freshen up in the bathroom. Julia's toiletry case caught my eye on the dresser, and I decided to rummage through it for some aspirin to soothe my headache from the long drive. While I didn't find any pills, I stumbled upon something unexpected in the side pocket, a pack of 6 condoms. I sat on the bed, staring at them in my hand, my mind racing with questions and doubts. After our son Darren was born, Julia started taking birth control pills. Unfortunately, they made her nauseous, so we decided that I would undergo a vasectomy. Since then, we hadn't used any form of birth control. It was a relief not to worry about condoms or pills, but now finding those condoms in her toiletry case left me dumbfounded. I wasn't naive. I quickly concluded that my beloved wife was indeed cheating on me. I felt lost, unsure of what to do next. As I searched through her case, I found a couple of safety pins she kept for clothing emergencies. Taking one of the pins, I carefully punctured a hole through the center of each condom. I then replaced them exactly as I had found them. Julia was still in the shower, so I grabbed my cell phone and called a friend back home. "Lester, it's James. I need a favor." "No problem." "What do you need?" "Wait about an hour, then call me on my cell and tell me there's been a pipe burst at the school and they need me urgently." "Actually, just make the call and I'll handle the rest." "Got it. I'll ring you around 7. Take care, buddy." With that, I hung up, feeling a mix of anxiety and determination about what lay ahead. I found myself grappling with the decision not to spend the night with my wife. Regret weighed heavily on me for what had already transpired, and I didn't want to compound it further. The drive home would give me time to gather my thoughts. Though I knew action was necessary, I was still unsure of what course to take. As Julia emerged from the shower, I battled the urge to confront her. Inside, I was consumed with fury, wanting to lash out at this woman, who was still technically my wife. Violence was not in my nature. I prided myself on keeping a level head and maintaining composure in any situation. It dawned on me that it might be wiser not to reveal my knowledge of her infidelity. By the time we reached the dining room, I was overwhelmed with a sense of despondency. "You can order anything you like, dear. It's all on expenses," I offered. "I'm not very hungry, to be honest." "I'll just have the small fillet," Julia replied. "That sounds good to me, too." "Shall we have a bottle of rosé with that?" I suggested, motioning for the waiter. Unable to resist, I felt compelled to probe a bit. "Julia, are you content with how our marriage is progressing?" "Absolutely. I have a lovely home, 2 wonderful children, and a husband who adores me. What more could I ask for?" She replied with a smile. "I suppose I just sometimes wonder if I'm doing everything I can to make you happy. I feel incredibly fortunate to have such an amazing wife." "Sometimes it feels surreal," I confessed, masking my inner turmoil behind a facade of admiration. "Oh, you silly goose. You drove all the way down here just to see me. Well, you really have nothing to worry about. I'm happy and content, and you're doing everything right. A woman couldn't ask for a better husband than you." Julia reassured me with a warm smile. As the waiter served our dinners, we engaged in light conversation throughout the meal, discussing trivial topics. Just as the plates were being cleared, my cell phone rang. Apologizing, I excused myself and stepped into the lobby to take the call, not wanting to disturb the other diners. After a brief wait, I returned to the table. "That was Lester. There's been a water pipe burst at the school. I really need to head back there as soon as possible. I'm sorry I have to cancel our plans for the night," I explained regretfully. A tinge of disappointment flickered across Julia's face, but I couldn't discern if it was genuine or not. It seemed inconsequential to her whether I stayed or left. Either way, she was going to get what she wanted. As we boarded the elevator, we ran into Bill Sanchez exiting. Bill was the business associate Julia often traveled with. "Hi, Julia. I stopped by the room to see if you wanted to grab some dinner, but there was no answer." "I see why now," Bill remarked, extending his hand. "Bill Sanchez, and you must be James. Julia talks about you all the time." "James came down for the night, but an emergency came up, and he has to head back," Julia explained smoothly. "Guess I'll be sleeping alone again tonight." It was excruciatingly difficult to maintain a pleasant facade while shaking hands and forcing a smile. As we ascended in the elevator, the nagging issue continued to gnaw at me, compelling me to broach the subject once more. "Julia, I really think it would be best if you quit your job, and I'd feel more at ease if you weren't working alongside Bill. We've talked about this before, and it means a lot to me," I ventured, trying to keep my voice steady. "James, I've already told you, I have no plans to leave my job. I enjoy what I do, and I'm gaining valuable experience working with Bill. You need to let go of this paranoia you have about Bill and me," Julia retorted firmly. Back in the room, after a brief kiss, I gathered my belongings and made my way out, bound for the journey home. With every mile, my mind churned with thoughts of Bill stopping by Julia's room after his supper. By the time I reached home, I felt like a wreck. The resentment towards my wife for her actions simmered within me. I wished I possessed the ingenuity to concoct elaborate schemes to catch a cheating spouse, but I felt utterly clueless. What could I possibly do? I couldn't even find a way to avoid intimacy with her. Divorce loomed as the desired outcome, yet I lacked substantial evidence to justify it. I felt utterly defeated. My wife was betraying me, and I was powerless to stop it. I refused to tolerate it any longer, but knew I needed assistance. 2 days later, Julia returned home, sporting a radiant smile that only fueled my anger. I couldn't resist checking her bag, and there it was, a solitary condom, still punctured. Saturday marked the annual Globus Insurance Company picnic, a day meant for enjoyment, especially for the kids. However, I couldn't muster any excitement for the event. Instead, I found myself plagued by the nagging suspicion that some of my colleagues were privy to what was happening in my personal life, leaving me feeling like a cuckold. Desperate to avoid becoming the subject of crude jokes, I kept a low profile, albeit feeling somewhat paranoid. Julia seemed to be relishing the social atmosphere, mingling effortlessly, particularly with Bill. While they weren't displaying any overtly affectionate behavior, their closeness was unmistakable. I found myself sidelined, but strangely, I didn't mind. "Hi, I'm Brittany Sanchez. You must be James Murphy." A voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned to find myself face to face with Brittany Sanchez, and I was taken aback. She was stunning, the epitome of allure straight out of a Pine-Up magazine. With her long auburn hair and piercing blue eyes, coupled with a perfect physique despite her petite stature, Brittany was a sight to behold. I adored my wife, Julia, and found her to be wonderful, but Brittany was undeniably captivating. Why would Bill Sanchez, her husband, cheat on someone as breathtaking as her? "Oh, sorry, I was lost in thought." "Hi, it's nice to meet you," I greeted Brittany, snapping back to reality. "Could we go somewhere quieter away from the kids and the noise?" she asked. "Absolutely, let's head down by the lake. I doubt anyone will notice we're gone," I suggested. We found a secluded spot with benches overlooking the serene waters, away from the hustle and bustle of the picnic. "I'm all ears." "What's on your mind?" I inquired as we settled in. Brittany hesitated, clearly grappling with how to broach the delicate topic. Sensing her hesitation, I decided to take the lead. "Are you referring to the affair between Bill and my wife?" "I only found out about it this week," I confessed. Relief washed over Brittany's face. "I've known for about 2 months. I'm preparing to file for divorce, but I need some assistance. I hired a detective to gather evidence, but my lawyer suggested it would strengthen my case if Julia would be willing to testify or provide a notarized statement confirming the affair." "What kind of proof do you have?" I asked. "I have photos and recorded phone conversations. I haven't managed to obtain any videos yet, but the evidence I do have is pretty compelling. I also have documented times and dates," Brittany explained. "I'll do what I can to help. I'm not sure how yet, but I'll figure something out. And do you think your lawyer could assist me with divorce papers using some of your evidence?" "I could really use it, as I have no proof at all," I admitted. "I'm also suing Globus. I have statements from certain management-level company officials confirming they were aware of the affair and did nothing to intervene. They'll have to make a choice, terminate both of them or face a $1 million lawsuit," Brittany revealed. "Wow, that's impressive," I remarked, genuinely impressed by her determination. "Bill's playing golf tomorrow morning. Can you come over to the house around mid-morning?" "He'll be gone until late afternoon. I can show you what evidence I have, and we can figure out our next steps. I live at 206 Hemlock Avenue in Crestmont," Brittany proposed. "Sure, consider it a plan." "Well, not really a plan, but you get what I mean," I replied with a chuckle. Despite the seriousness of the situation, I found myself feeling at ease with Brittany. We strolled back up to the picnic area, unnoticed by anyone. A sense of optimism washed over me. Perhaps there was a chance to untangle this mess after all. I hope so, anyway. True to expectations, the next morning, Julia informed me she had some errands to run and would be out for a couple of hours. After dropping the kids off at my mom's, I headed over to Crestmont. Brittany greeted me at the door, and we made our way to the den. The room was tastefully furnished, with a plush leather couch and a large computer monitor on the table. "I have beer, soda, and wine." "What's your poison?" Brittany offered. "Regular soda works for me. Pepsi if you have it." "So, what's the story, Brittany?" I inquired as I took a seat. "Well, in a few minutes we're going to watch my charming husband play a round of golf, live in full color. I hope you won't be too shocked, but I think you'll recognize his caddy," Brittany revealed. "How on earth did you manage this?" I asked, astonished. "It cost me $1,400 to set everything up. I hope it's worth it. And of course, Bill will foot the bill. I reckon it'll last about 2 hours, so get comfy. I've got popcorn and nachos to keep us entertained. Oh, and I'll be getting a DVD of the whole thing. You're welcome to a copy, Brittany explained with a wry smile. I'm not exactly thrilled about watching this, but at the same time, I wouldn't miss it for anything. Let the show begin, I remarked with a mix of apprehension and curiosity. For about 20 minutes, we engaged in small talk while Brittany shared the evidence she had gathered about the affair. I was stunned by the photos, tapes, and documents she had compiled. The weight of realization settled upon me. I now knew for certain what Julia was up to, and it crushed me. I was taken aback to discover that Brittany had 3 large koi ponds in her backyard. Intrigued, I expressed my interest in seeing them and asked if I could bring the children over sometime. Brittany seemed delighted at the idea and eagerly agreed to host them. Just then there was some activity on the monitor. As predicted by Brittany, Bill and Julia entered the room and wasted no time in shedding their clothes. There was no preamble, no small talk, just a swift transition to the bed. The video quality was impressive, though the sound was a bit distorted. Nevertheless, the visuals were all that mattered. Sitting on the couch beside a stranger, watching my wife and her husband engage in intimate acts felt uncomfortable. Brittany, I hate to interrupt the show, but do we really have to watch all of this? I ventured. I sense that you're not keen on this, Brittany observed. Not really. Honestly, I'm feeling a bit uneasy watching this, especially with you sitting right next to me, I confessed. The entire encounter is being recorded, which is all we really need for the lawyers. We don't have to watch it. Frankly, I'm not deriving any pleasure from it either. The storyline seems pretty predictable. So are you heading home? Brittany responded. Well, actually, I was hoping you could show me your koi ponds instead. I think that would be a lot more interesting than 2 hours of, well, I suggested. Her eyes lit up at the prospect, simply because I had shown an interest in her hobby. As we made our way to the backyard, I couldn't help but feel that I was in for a far more enjoyable afternoon than my wife was having. The 3 fish ponds were truly remarkable. As someone with a plumbing background before landing my job at the school, I found the pumping and filter systems particularly fascinating. It surprised me to learn that Bill didn't assist Brittany with her hobby at all, leaving her to hire professionals for any maintenance work on the pipes or pumps. I offered to lend a hand whenever Bill was occupied with golf. My intention wasn't to make advances on Brittany. I genuinely wanted to delve deeper into the world of koi ponds, though spending time with her was an added bonus. Hours flew by as we immersed ourselves in the mesmerizing world of the fish ponds. Reluctantly, we returned to the house, only to find the motel room monitor empty. It was clear it was time for me to head home. Brittany assured me she'd give me a heads up whenever Bill had another golf game so I could bring Diana and Darren along. The following weeks proved to be a challenge. Each time Julia took a shower, I found myself checking her bag. Without fail, I discovered a fresh supply of condoms. It baffled me when she found the time to use them all. I kept a safety pin on my keychain, ready to puncture them if need be. I anticipated Julia's sudden urge to visit her sister any day now. On evenings following Bill's golf games, the kids would excitedly recount their visit to the koi lady, but Julia never seemed interested. They'd proudly display their drawings of the fish and share the names they'd given each one. Yet she failed to connect Bill's wife to the koi lady. It was evident that she was relieved to have me keeping the kids occupied while she carried on with her infidelity. I made 2 more attempts to persuade her to quit her job and end her association with Bill, but both were met with the same resolute rejection, the second being particularly hostile. Additionally, I found myself making excuses to avoid intimacy with her, and in response, she hurled a few cutting remarks about my masculinity. While it stung, it only strengthened my resolve to continue my course of action. It was a Tuesday night when Julia dropped the bombshell. James, I've been feeling really stressed out lately. I think I need to take a few days off from work and visit my sister for about a week. Would you be able to watch the kids while I take some time to unwind? She asked. Of course, honey. You've been putting in a lot of overtime and late nights. Taking a trip to your sister sounds like a great idea. It's much better than spending a year with a shrink. Go ahead and enjoy yourself. I'll take care of everything, I replied, masking the turmoil brewing within me. I'm glad you understand. All this extra work has been for the good of the family, but I think I might have overdone it," Julia admitted. That night, sleep eluded me as I mulled over the tasks I had to tackle the next day. Yet, I couldn't deny a sense of relief that this moment had finally arrived. Julia's sister, Zara, and her husband, Noor, lived about 3 hours away. Noor was an all-right guy, but he was completely submissive to Zara's wishes. When Zara said jump, Noor jumped. What intrigued me about the town where they resided was the presence of 2 abortion clinics. I had meticulously noted down the names, addresses, and hours of operation for both. Moreover, I familiarized myself with the terms of agreement required for service at each clinic. They both mandated a 2-day cooling-off period, meaning the soonest Julia could have a procedure scheduled was Friday if her first appointment was on Wednesday. I reasoned she would try to expedite the process to allow for a few days' recovery before returning home. This gave me roughly a day and a half to finalize my plans. It seemed manageable. Once Julia embarked on her supposed rest and recuperation trip, I wasted no time in putting my plans into action. It was difficult for me to admit to my parents that I had failed as a husband, but they were understanding and offered their unwavering support. The kids were enjoying their time with them, and my dad's truck would prove handy for moving Julia's belongings out. By Thursday morning, the lawyer had all the necessary paperwork ready for me to pick up. Likewise, Brittany had her documents prepared, intending to serve Bill simultaneously with my serving Julia. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that I owed Julia one last chance to make things right, though my hopes were dwindling. Dad and I busied ourselves packing Julia's belongings for the move. Thursday morning, after a 3-hour drive, I arrived at the first clinic, only to be met with disappointment. With one strikeout, I had one more clinic to try, the Family Planning Center. Summoning all the confidence I could muster, I approached the receptionist. "Hi, I'm James Murphy. My wife, Julia, mentioned I needed to come in and sign a consensual agreement form," I explained to the receptionist. "What kind of form?" she inquired. "I'm not entirely sure of the exact name, but it's a form indicating that I understand and agree to everything that's happening, and I waive any rights to legal action," I clarified. "Hang on a moment, that was Julia Murphy, correct?" she verified, clicking away at her computer. "Yes, that's right. Do you need any identification?" I asked. She shook her head, signaling she didn't require any further identification, then continued typing for a few more seconds. Her sister signed on her behalf, but it would be preferable to have your signature. "Let me retrieve the file," she informed me. I mentally braced myself, knowing I had only a couple of minutes to get through. When she returned, she placed the form in front of me and instructed me to sign below Zara's signature. Glancing at the document, I noticed the procedure was scheduled for Friday morning at 11 a.m., with arrival an hour earlier. "Is there any outstanding payment required?" I inquired, reaching for my checkbook and placing it on the counter. "No, your wife has already paid the full amount, $800 in cash. There's nothing further due at this time," she informed me. "Thank you for your assistance. It's much appreciated," I expressed my gratitude. The receptionist's efficient handling of the matter eased my burden somewhat. However, the welcome I received upon arriving at Zara and Noor's place was overwhelmingly insincere, bordering on comical. Julia led with, "James, what a delightful surprise. What brings you here?" "Well, Mom and Dad kindly offered to look after the kids for a few days, so I decided to take some sick leave and thought I'd surprise you guys. I guess you could say I needed a bit of a break too," I replied casually. The atmosphere in the room was tense, with everyone seemingly lost in their own thoughts. By putting them on the spot, I had forced them to come up with a solution to my unexpected appearance. Zara silently signaled to Noor to join her in the kitchen, while Julia attempted to fill the silence with inconsequential chatter. After a few minutes, Noor re-entered the room with a suggestion. "James, I've got a brilliant idea. I can take the day off tomorrow and borrow my buddy Scott's bass boat. We can head out early and spend the day on the lake, giving the ladies some space. How does that sound, buddy?" "Sounds perfect to me, Noor. A day out on the water sounds like just what I need to clear my mind." "Make sure Scott can join us," I replied, playing along. "All right, I'll arrange everything," Noor agreed, visibly relieved at the resolution. With the tension diffused, we proceeded to have a quiet supper and spent the rest of the evening engaged in endless conversation. The following morning, Scott arrived early with the boat, while Noor busied himself in the kitchen preparing lunch and stocking the cooler with beer. As we loaded the truck and boat, Noor questioned why I wasn't getting into the truck. "I've decided to sit this one out, Noor. I suggest you make the most of the day, because I don't think you'll want to face Zara for the next few hours," I explained calmly. Noor attempted to persuade me to change my mind, but after a brief, heated exchange, I stood firm, and eventually Scott and Noor departed without me. I made my way into the house and poured myself a cup of coffee, feeling a sense of determination coursing through me. Switching off Zara's cell phone, I then dialed my dad on the landline. Dad was always an early riser, and our conversation lasted for a good 2 hours. Throughout our chat, the call waiting feature chimed in repeatedly, indicating Noor's persistent attempts to reach Zara, which ultimately went unanswered. As I heard Zara and Julia stirring, I bid farewell to my father and prepared myself for the impending confrontation. Clearing the missed calls from the landline, I switched Zara's cell phone back on. With less than 2 hours until Julia and Zara's appointment at the Family Planning Center, I braced myself to face the wrath of two furious women. Finishing my coffee, I brewed another pot, this time for my beloved wife and her sister. "James, what on earth are you doing here?" Julia exclaimed, shock evident in her voice. "I just wasn't feeling up for fishing, so I thought I'd stick around with you guys today. I figured we could go out for a nice lunch together. I have to head back tonight, so I didn't fancy spending the day on a boat with Noor and Scott," I explained casually. Julia's expression turned stern. "No, that won't work. Zara and I have plans for today. We'd rather go alone. I can hang out with you anytime, but I only get to see Zara a couple of times a year." "You're going to be here all week, Julia. I think you can spare me at least half a day, considering I drove all the way down here," I replied evenly. Zara grabbed her cell phone and stormed out of the room, dialing on the go. Meanwhile, Julia slumped in her kitchen chair, looking utterly deflated as if she'd been hit by a truck. From the kitchen, we could hear Zara berating Noor over the phone as if he committed a grave offense. I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for the poor guy, but then again, he did marry her. "James, I don't want to be rude about this, but Zara and I really don't want you joining us today. We've got our entire day planned out, and frankly, it doesn't involve you," Julia explained, her tone weary. "All right, tell me what you've got lined up for today and I'll decide. If it doesn't appeal to me, I'll find something else to keep myself occupied, but I still don't quite understand. You've got the whole week here, while I only have today. You're not meeting up with a couple of guys, are you?" I teased, trying to lighten the mood. "No, for heaven's sake, we're not meeting any guys. We just wanted to do some shopping for intimate stuff. Bras, underwear, and nightgowns. It's the kind of shopping where we'd rather not have you guys around, ogling while we're trying things on," Julia clarified, exasperated. "Well, most of those shops are in the mall, and I can easily find ways to keep myself occupied while you're in the dressing rooms. I'll just tag along and stay out of your way. You won't have to entertain me. And when lunchtime rolls around, I'll treat you to somewhere fancy to make up for any inconvenience I've caused," I reassured, hoping to ease any lingering tensions. Zara stood in the doorway, her expression a mix of frustration and irritation. Despite her silent glare, it was clear she wasn't going to persuade me. Julia, sensing the futility of the situation, stood up. "I need to go get dressed," she announced, a note of defeat in her voice. As Julia left the room, Zara shot me a scathing look. "You're a real piece of work, you know that," she spat out before following Julia upstairs. About 20 minutes later, the light on the landline phone blinked on, signaling someone upstairs was making a call. Time was ticking. They had an hour before their appointment at the center. I pondered my next move. If they attempted to leave without me, I'd simply follow them and ensure they knew it. However, I doubted they would try such a maneuver. 20 minutes later, they descended the stairs. "All right, James, let's go shopping," Julia declared, her tone laced with a hint of defiance. It was easier than I expected. The phone call upstairs was likely to reschedule the appointment at the family planning center. Since I had mentioned leaving that night, they probably decided to wait until I was gone. My aim wasn't to halt Julia's plans, but rather to make them more inconvenient for her. I insisted on driving my car, determined not to let them ditch me somewhere. A few miles from the house, I pulled into a service station. I meticulously filled up the gas tank, checked the oil and water, and cleaned the windshield, taking my time deliberately. They both sat in the car, simmering with frustration. Arriving at the mall, I parked far out, ensuring a lengthy walk. Once inside, I largely left them to their own devices. I kept a discreet eye on them, but had little interest in their activities or purchases. They didn't appear to be enjoying themselves. Most of their time was spent in intense conversation and gesturing. They bought a few items, likely just to prove they had been shopping. Despite my efforts to remain inconspicuous, I still kept them within sight. It was evident that they were engaged in serious discussion. As the appointment time passed, I had successfully delayed the inevitable. I knew Julia would still proceed with the procedure, so I had no intention of further interference. Around noon, we reconvened at the mall's central court as agreed. We headed to the Olive Garden for lunch and returned home around 2 p.m. Conversation during lunch, and the drive was minimal. Throughout, I couldn't help but smile to myself, knowing that these two women were seething with animosity towards me, and I relished the feeling. Back at the house, I grabbed a beer and relaxed on the sofa. Noor eventually arrived home, only to endure a 30-minute verbal lashing from Zara. He quickly slipped out, disappearing for a couple of hours before returning in time for supper. After the girls finished tidying up, I asked Noor and Zara if Julia and I could have a private conversation in the kitchen. Zara shot me a disdainful look, but they both retreated to the living room. Julia was visibly still upset with me, her demeanor tense as she braced herself for our conversation. "Julia, I need to ask you once more. Will you please consider quitting your job and ending your association with Bill Sanchez?" I spoke calmly, trying to maintain composure despite the tension in the room. Her jaw clenched tightly, betraying her simmering frustration. "I've told you before, James, I'm not quitting my job, and I'm not cutting ties with Bill. That's final. If you can't accept that, then we have nothing more to discuss." I reached for the manila envelope by my chair, extracting a legal-sized one. "Julia, I've asked you multiple times over the past months, and you've refused each time. I had no other recourse. These are divorce papers. All you need to do is sign them and mail them in. There's even a self-addressed stamped envelope included. If you want a lawyer to review them, that's your prerogative." She glared at me, leaning forward. "You can't just divorce me because I won't do what you want. You need grounds for a divorce, and you don't have any. I suggest you go home and reconsider your actions. I'm your wife, and I have no intention of upending my life just because you're unhappy with my choices." "Julia, why did you choose to visit your sister this week?" I asked, my tone firm. "That's a ridiculous question." "We already discussed this," she retorted, her voice tinged with annoyance. "That was a lie, and you know it. What was the real reason?" I pressed. "You think you know everything, don't you?" Her response was defensive. "Julia, why did you and Zora go to the family planning center on Wednesday?" I persisted, noticing her discomfort growing. Silence filled the room, broken only by Julia's uneasy shifting in her chair. Her bravado was slipping. "I don't know what you're talking about," she finally muttered, avoiding my gaze. Leaning forward, I adopted a serious tone. "Why did you hand over $800 in cash to the family planning center?" Her eyes darted away, her discomfort palpable. She remained silent, swallowing hard. "Why did you have an appointment at the family planning center for 11 a.m. this morning? What was that money for?" I demanded, my voice unwavering. "Stop badgering me. It's none of your business." Her anger flared up again. "Julia, the family planning center performs abortions. You know it, I know it, and everyone in town knows it. Given that I've had a vasectomy, why would you need an abortion?" I confronted her directly. Her response was cutting. "Maybe your operation wasn't as successful as you thought. Perhaps you should get yourself checked." I retrieved the lab reports from the envelope beside me. "Here are 3 lab reports. 2 months ago, 1 month ago, and last week. They all confirm that I'm sterile. Do you have a report from the Family Planning Center confirming that you're not pregnant? You're truly despicable. But that's still not enough to justify a divorce, Julia retorted, her tone laced with resentment. Why won't you just admit that you've been having an affair with Bill Sanchez for the past 6 months? We both know the truth, yet you refuse to acknowledge it, I challenged. You have no evidence whatsoever that I've been involved with anyone else. I don't want to sit here and listen to your baseless accusations, she fired back defensively. So nothing happened between you and Bill Sanchez, I pressed. Absolutely not. I'm your wife and I've been faithful to you, she asserted firmly. Then how did you become pregnant? I asked pointedly. As I placed the stack of photos on the table, Julia erupted in anger. Stop it. Just stop it. All right, fine. I get it. You've been spying on me like some sneaky, perverted creep. If you knew something was going on, why didn't you confront me like a man? Instead, you resort to this cowardly behavior. Your pathetic actions make me sick. As my cell phone rang, I answered, Hi, Dad. Okay, 10 minutes works. Thanks for letting me know. Hanging up, Julia interrupted. What was that about? Dad's bringing your belongings here to Zara's place. He'll be here in about 10 minutes. The locks on our house have been changed. If there's anything we forgot to pack, just let me know, and I'll bring it down to you. I explained, trying to keep my tone neutral. She remained silent, absorbing the information. Here's the title to your car. I've signed it over to you. In this envelope is half of the money from our bank accounts, approximately $1,200. I've arranged for you to have visitation rights with the kids once a week, and if you're willing to provide a notarized statement confirming the affair, I'll allow overnight stays once a month. I continued, handing her the documents. Oh, by the way, there's a DVD I didn't get to show you. It's from the May 10th visit you and Bill made to the Scandia Motel. It's 2 hours long and captures everything in those photos I mentioned, gesturing toward the images on the table. I didn't take any of these. Frankly, I didn't care about your activities. I just couldn't tolerate being deceived. Lastly, I'd like you to have this keepsake of our love, I said, sliding a safety pin across the table toward her. What's this? She demanded. That's the pin I used to poke holes in all your condoms for the past 2 months. Did you know you went through 48 rubbers in the last 2 weeks alone? You despicable coward. You're disgusting. Julia hissed, her face twisted in rage. No, darling, the most disgusting thing is cheating on your husband. I may be a bastard, but you're a genuine cheating liar. Sorry, I have to run. Dad just pulled up in the driveway. Oh, and in case you missed it, you never said you were sorry, nor did you apologize for what you did. I don't think you deserve to be married to me. Goodbye, Julia. Enjoy your abortion on Monday, I concluded as I left the room. Zara rushed in to comfort her, while Noor followed me out onto the front porch. What the hell are you doing, man? Noor grabbed my arm. You two have been married for 14 years. You can't just throw that all away over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Noor, why did my wife come down to visit you and Zara? I pressed. He looked down at his feet, pondering for a moment. Sorry, James. Let me help you unload the truck. We managed to unload the truck in about 10 minutes. Julia was wailing the entire time in the kitchen. I didn't know what she was crying about, and frankly, I didn't care. Bill and Julia were both fired from Glovis the following week. Julia refused to sign an affidavit, but Brittany's lawyer assured me that her case was strong enough without it. After that night, I didn't hear from Julia at all. She didn't come to see the children, but they didn't seem bothered as they were forming a strong bond with Brittany. We spent a lot of time together as a family, being careful not to jeopardize the divorces. The kids and I were learning a lot about Koi and having a great time doing it. Finally, after 4 months, both divorces were finalized. Julia didn't contest hers, but Bill fought tooth and nail. He lost the house, all the investments, and ended up with a hefty monthly alimony payment. A few days before Christmas, Julia showed up at the house with presents for the kids. I remained polite and didn't do anything to ruin the holiday spirit. She stayed for about 2 hours and left quietly. We didn't discuss the divorce or the affair. I put the house up for sale, and 2 months later, we moved in with Brittany. Bill took a job in Omaha, and Julia went with him. 4 months later, Bill disappeared without telling her where he was going. Julia moved back in with Zara after Nora left for a job on the Alaskan pipeline. 2 months later, Zara received divorce papers in the mail. I'm sure the two sisters are good company for each other. Brittany and I are comfortable together. She adores the kids, and they feel the same way about her. We're planning on getting married in June and spend every moment we can practicing for the honeymoon.